My name is Evelyn Carter, and I've spent most of my life believing that money was the answer to everything. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, I watched my parents struggle to make ends meet. By the time I was a teenager, I made a silent promise to myself. I would never feel powerless, invisible, or poor again. I wanted control, respect, and admiration, the kind that comes from being successful, wealthy, and untouchable. And for a while, I had it all. I built a real estate empire from scratch, single-handedly raising my son, Michael, after his father passed away unexpectedly. I gave him every opportunity I never had, providing a life filled with private schools, summer trips, and luxuries I denied myself. But I also made mistakes. I was controlling, judgmental, and often too proud to admit I was wrong. And when Michael met Lena, my son's quiet, unassuming girlfriend, I hated her immediately. Not because she was malicious, but because she didn't worship me, and she didn't seem impressed by anything I had built. Lena represented everything I feared. Someone ordinary, someone real, who might overshadow me without even trying. As the months passed, Michael began spending less time with me. He wouldn't take my calls, canceled visits, and grew distant in ways I couldn't understand. I blamed Lena for all of it. I told myself she had turned him against me, manipulating him with charm and sweetness while I, his mother, was the villain. My anger and pride simmered like a pot ready to boil over. Then one evening, everything came to a head. We had one of our typical arguments over nothing money, family decisions, something trivial, but this one escalated. Michael shouted he was done listening to me and hung up the phone. I sat in my office staring at the framed photographs of my accomplishments, my first sold house, the check for my first million, Michael's graduation. All of it suddenly felt meaningless. For the first time, I questioned whether I had been loved for who I was, or only for what I had. It hit me then. Like a lightning bolt in the middle of a calm sky. What if everyone I loved only cared about my money? The idea wouldn't leave me. What if I could disappear from their lives, vanish completely, and see who would still be there for me when I had nothing left? I was angry, yes, but I was also curious, and curiosity, combined with pride, can be dangerous. By the next morning, I had made a decision. I would pretend I had lost everything. My home, my business, my bank accounts, my car, my reputation. I would reduce myself to a version of myself I had never allowed anyone to see. Vulnerable, broke, and utterly human. I needed to know the truth. Who in my family would stand by me when I had nothing to offer? I started planning immediately. I went through my closets and chose old, worn-out clothes that didn't scream Evelyn Carter, successful businesswoman. I packed a cheap, battered suitcase with the bare essentials: clothes, toiletries, a few personal items. My expensive jewelry and designer handbags were hidden away. They would serve no purpose in this experiment. I rehearsed my story in the mirror for hours. I was a woman down on her luck alone, and desperate. But there was one person I dreaded seeing more than anyone else. Lena, the daughter-in-law I had despised for years. I knew she would be the ultimate test. If she rejected me, it would confirm everything I had believed, that she was selfish, cold, and manipulative. If she welcomed me, it would shatter every judgment I had made about her hand, maybe even about myself. And so, with a pounding heart and a mind spinning with anticipation, I stepped out of my front door for the first time as a woman I barely recognized. The streets felt different, quieter, somehow judgmental. For the first time in decades, I wasn't in control. I was just Evelyn the human, not the matriarch, not the millionaire, not the mother everyone respected or feared. And that's when I realized this journey wouldn't just reveal the truth about my family, it would reveal the truth about me. I had no idea how frightening it was to be invisible until that day. The streets I had once walked with confidence, head held high in designer heels, now seemed endless and cold. I carried my battered suitcase with trembling hands, feeling every eye glance at me, or more accurately, ignore me. People passed without a second thought. Some stared at my worn coat as if I were contagious. Others crossed the street to avoid me entirely. The realization hit me like a punch in the gut. Without money, my world didn't just shrink, it disappeared. I decided to start with my sister, Margaret. We had grown up close, sharing secrets and dreams, but we hadn't spoken properly in years. I knocked on her door, rehearsing my voice as if it were an audition. When she opened, her face froze not with surprise, but with something colder. "Oh, Evelyn," she said slowly, glancing past me into the house. "I'm sorry, I can't help right now." And she closed the door. The click of the lock echoed in my ears like a hammer. My own sister, my blood, my family gone. I wandered aimlessly for hours, stopping at friends' homes, old acquaintances I used to host lavish parties for, people I had helped in business deals or charity events. Every single one of them turned me away. Some lied, saying they weren't home. Others offered a brief, uncomfortable smile before shutting the door without even listening. I Started to feel my old self, the Evelyn who had been so proud, so sure of her worth, slipping away. My stomach growled with hunger, my shoes ached, and the wind cut through my coat like knives. But the part that hurt the most wasn't physical. It was the rejection, the glaring emptiness where respect, love, or even concern should have been. At one point I found myself sitting on a curb, suitcase beside me, staring at the houses across the street. Each home seemed alive with laughter and warmth, families inside enjoying comfort and security. And there I was, a shadow. I realized how dependent I had been on appearances and wealth to command attention. Without them, I had nothing. I wondered if this experiment was a mistake. Maybe I had gone too far. Maybe some bridges were meant to burn, and yet I still had one house left. The one that scared me most, Lena's. I had avoided her for months after my son moved in with her. I didn't know if she would recognize me, or worse, if she would answer the door at all. My heart pounded as I approached her small, humble home. It wasn't a mansion like no marble floors, no chandeliers, just a modest house with a neat garden. The sight made something twist inside me. I had always looked down on this life. Now, it seemed peaceful. I paused before knocking, taking a deep breath. I imagined her face, calm and composed, ready to scold or reject me. I wanted her to be cruel so that I could say, "See, you were always selfish." I lifted my hand and knocked. A moment later, the door opened. She looked at me carefully, her brown eyes calm but alert. She didn't smile, but she didn't judge either. I stammered, trying to hold my voice steady. I don't have anywhere else to go," I said, my words barely above a whisper. For a heartbeat, she said nothing. Then she stepped aside. "Come in," she said simply. "You shouldn't be out there like this." I froze. My chest tightened. My mind raced. This wasn't the reaction I expected. I had prepared for disdain, for rejection, maybe even mockery. But her kindness caught me off guard, piercing through my anger and pride. As I stepped inside, the warmth of the house hit me like a physical wave. The smell of fresh bread, the soft hum of a radio, and the faint scent of laundry soap, mundane, ordinary yet comforting. It was a stark contrast to the cold streets I had been wandering all day. And as I looked around, a terrifying thought settled in. Lena might be the only one who actually cared. I couldn't believe it. After a day of being turned away, stared at, and ignored, here was Lena, the daughter-in-law I had despised for years, opening her door to me like I was just another human being in need of help. My chest tightened, and I felt a mix of suspicion, disbelief, and something I wasn't ready to admit, guilt. I stepped into her home, carrying my battered suitcase, my stomach knotting with anxiety. The house was modest, nothing like the mansions I was used to. A cozy living room with soft lighting, a small kitchen, and the faint hum of a radio in the background. There was an ordinary warmth here that money had never bought me, and for some reason it made me feel smaller than I had in years. "Sit down," Lena said gently, gesturing toward the sofa. She didn't ask questions, didn't demand proof. She just made space for me. I wanted to pull back, to maintain my pride, but my body betrayed me. I sank onto the couch, gripping my suitcase like a shield. "So, what happened?" she asked softly. I opened my mouth, but no words came. How could I explain years of pride, anger, and the foolish need to test everyone I claimed to love? I swallowed hard and whispered, I don't have anywhere else to go." She nodded, as if she understood more than I could ever imagine. "Okay," she said, "you can stay here tonight. Let's get you some food first." Food. That simple word cut through me. Not because I was starving, it was that for the first time that day. Someone treated me like a human, not a project, not a businesswoman, not someone to impress or fear. I was just Evelyn. Lena disappeared into the kitchen, and I followed the sound of clattering dishes with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Why is she helping me? I thought, what's the catch? I had spent so long believing that kindness had a price, that generosity was always transactional, that I couldn't imagine a world where someone could help freely. When she returned with a plate of warm food, I realized something about her I had refused to see before. Lena wasn't fake. She wasn't manipulating my son. She simply cared. And she wasn't doing it for approval or recognition. She was doing it because she believed it was the right thing to do. I ate slowly, unsure how to digest the food and the realization that I had misjudged her for years. Every bite brought guilt rushing in like a flood. All this time, I hated her for existing. I hated her because she made me feel unnecessary, small, and powerless. But here she was, treating me like family. Even when I had spent years undermining her. After dinner, she brought me a towel and some clean clothes. I looked at them, feeling my pride crumble. The simple act of giving clothes to someone in need should have been normal, but for me, it was almost unbearable. I wanted to argue, to refuse, to insist I didn't deserve this, but something in Lena's calm presence stopped me. I couldn't argue with genuine kindness. As I changed into the worn but clean clothes, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. The reflection was almost unrecognizable. This wasn't the Evelyn Carter who commanded rooms with her confidence, who negotiated millions, who had always been admired or feared. This Evelyn was small, vulnerable, human. And yet, for the first time in years, I felt alive. We sat together after that, drinking tea in silence. I watched her move around the kitchen, the way she laughed quietly at nothing, the way she folded laundry with care, and I realized something terrifying. I had spent years seeing her as an enemy, and yet she was the only one who had opened her door when it mattered. A thought struck me hard, like a punch. What if she is the only one in my family who truly has a heart? I didn't want to admit it, but the truth was clear. I had come to punish my family, to test their loyalty, to seek revenge. And now, the only person who had passed the test wasn't someone I had respected, was the woman I hated most. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Fear. Fear of the truth. Fear that my plan, my pride, my carefully constructed life might be meaningless in the face of genuine human kindness. And yet, despite my fear, I couldn't leave. Not tonight. Not when I finally understood that this woman, this quiet, unassuming, patient woman might hold the key to the truth I had been running from all along. The night stretched on, and I sat there on her couch, wondering what would come next. I had no idea that this moment, this single act of kindness, was about to change everything. I never imagined that one act of kindness could feel like a punch to the chest. Lena moved around her small kitchen with a calm efficiency, humming softly, and it hit me that she had no idea who I really was. She didn't know I was the woman she'd once despised, the mother of her husband, the millionaire she had quietly feared and, unknowingly, been judged by. To her, I was just a woman in need. She was doing what she thought was right. She handed me a plate of warm soup, the steam curling up like a delicate invitation. I sat down at the small table, my hands wrapped around the bowl, trying to ignore the shaking that had nothing to do with the cold. I had walked the streets all day pretending to be powerless, and now here she was offering me sustenance with a gentle smile. "Eat," she said softly. "You need it." I wanted to snap, to say, "I don't need your pity," but my throat was too tight. Instead, I took a slow sip and felt the warmth spread through me. Hunger had nothing to do with it, was the unexpected generosity. The simple fact that someone had opened her door to me when no one else had. My pride twisted inside me, furious at the irony of it. We sat together for a while in silence. I didn't know what to say. The words I had practiced, the lines I had rehearsed for days, suddenly seemed meaningless. There was no script for this. No clever retort, no dramatic reveal. Just Lena, quietly existing in a way I had spent years trying to avoid. I watched her move around her home, folding laundry, straightening cushions, humming as if the world wasn't full of betrayal and disappointment. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I had spent my life building walls around myself, guarding my pride and my fortune, believing it would protect me from hurt. And yet here I was, utterly powerless before her simple human decency. She didn't ask for explanations. She didn't demand proof. She didn't question why I was on her doorstep or how I had fallen into this situation. She simply treated me like a person who needed help and nothing more. As I looked around, I saw pictures of her family on the walls. Michael as a child, smiling, holding her hand, the life she had built quietly, without fanfare, without needing recognition. It was ordinary, modest, and yet it radiated something I had spent decades searching for in all the wrong places. Love, stability, integrity, and I hated her for it. I hated her for being the person who could give without taking, for having the strength to endure years of subtle disrespect from me, for being the woman my son chose to spend his life with, and for being better than I had ever been, in ways I didn't even know how to measure after a while. She handed me a towel and some clean clothes. I stared at them, stunned. This was a small act, almost mundane, and yet it felt like a lifeline. I wanted to refuse, to assert my superiority, to prove that I didn't need her charity, but something inside me, something I had buried under layers of pride, said, "Take it, accept it, learn something." I changed into the worn clothes, feeling a strange mixture of shame and relief. The reflection in the mirror was unfamiliar. I wasn't the powerful businesswoman who had commanded respect with a glance. I was just Evelyn, human, vulnerable, and fragile. And for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of humility and fear. Fear of what I was about to realize. Fear that my plan, my revenge, my tests of loyalty might all collapse in the face of something I had never anticipated. Pure, selfless kindness. Lena noticed my hesitation and sat down beside me, her expression calm but attentive. "You're safe here tonight," she said. "Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. But right now, you need rest." Her words, simple and unassuming, hit me harder than any confrontation ever could. I wanted to argue, to remind her of everything I had been through, everything I had earned, everything I thought entitled me to respect. But the truth was impossible to deny. I had come to punish my family, to expose their disloyalty, to feel justified in my anger. The one person I hated most had passed the test without even knowing there was one. That night, as I lay on her couch wrapped in a thin blanket, the sounds of her home humming quietly around me, I realized something terrifying. I had underestimated her, and I had underestimated myself. The next morning, sunlight spilled into Lena's kitchen, soft and golden, filtering through simple curtains. I woke up on her couch, the blanket wrapped loosely around me. And for the first time in days, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Peace. Not happiness, not joy, not pride, just peace. It was unnerving. I followed Lena into the kitchen, expecting her to go about her routine as usual, but I noticed something in the way she moved. There was no rush, no pretense, no need to impress anyone. She was just steady, solid human, and my pride, which had felt untouchable all these years, started to crumble again under the weight of this realization. "You hungry?" she asked casually, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. I nodded, unable to speak. Hunger wasn't the issue. My throat was tight with shame and confusion. She handed me a plate of scrambled eggs and toast, and we sat together in silence for a moment. The ordinary act of eating with someone, the quiet clinking of utensils, the hum of the coffee maker, was strangely intimate. I had spent so much of my life in boardrooms, hotels, and parties, commanding respect and admiration, and never had I felt more invisible. And yet, in this ordinary kitchen, I felt seen in a way I didn't know I wanted. Finally, Lena spoke, breaking the silence. "You know," she began, her voice gentle but firm, "life hasn't been easy for me either." I looked up at her, curious despite myself. I work 2 jobs most days. I sometimes stay up late making sure the kids are fed and ready for school. People assume I have it easy because of who I married or because of your reputation. But it hasn't been easy. She paused, eyes calm but unwavering. "And through it all, I've tried to respect you, even when you were kind, even when it felt like you hated me." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. Every assumption I had made about her, every secret resentment I had carried, began to crumble. This woman, who I had seen as my enemy, had endured years of subtle insults, judgments, and coldness from me, and yet she was still standing, still kind, still human. I don't know what to say," I admitted, my voice shaking. The truth was, I had no excuse, no justification. My carefully constructed pride and power meant nothing here. Lena didn't care about my money or my status. She didn't need me to be impressive. She just cared. She smiled faintly, as if she could see right through my defenses. "You don't have to say anything, but maybe, just maybe, you should stop pretending everything is about control and start seeing people for who they really are." The words stung. They peeled away layers of ego I hadn't realized were still clinging to me. I had come here to punish, to test, to expose the weaknesses of my family, and instead, I was being confronted with my own weaknesses, my own failings. In the quietest, most devastating way, I couldn't help but ask, "Why are you helping me? After everything I've done, why are you being kind?" She shrugged, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Because that's who I am. I believe in doing what's right even when it's hard. And sometimes, the people who seem to hate us the most, they're the ones who need kindness the most." Her words echoed in my mind as I stared at my untouched toast. She didn't see me as an enemy. She didn't see me as a test or a project. She saw me as a person. And for the first time, I realized something terrifying. I had spent my entire life measuring people by what they could give me, and not by who they really were. I wanted to argue, to justify myself, to cling to my pride, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I felt a strange mix of guilt and awe. Lena, the woman I had despised, had taught me more in a single morning than I had learned in decades of business deals, social climbing, and controlling everyone around me. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed. The plan I had spent weeks crafting, to test, to punish, to see who would remain loyal, suddenly felt meaningless, because here she was, the one person I hated most, showing me more humanity in one morning than I had ever earned. And for the first time, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake that afternoon. After breakfast, Lena and I sat in her living room. I had cleaned up the dishes, partly to avoid thinking too much, partly because I felt ashamed to leave them there. I tried to focus on the hum of the washing machine, the soft sunlight spilling across the floor. Anything to keep my thoughts from spinning into panic. I knew I couldn't keep pretending forever. Every fiber of me wanted to escape, to leave before the truth came out, but at the same time, I couldn't. My pride had led me here, and now my curiosity and, perhaps, a small spark of guilt wouldn't let me turn away. Finally, I took a deep breath. Lena, I began, my voice trembling despite my attempt to steady it. There's something you need to know. She tilted her head, calm and expectant. What is it? I'm not who you think I am, I admitted. I paused, struggling to find the words, feeling my face grow hot. I'm Evelyn Carter, Michael's mother. Her eyes widened slightly, and for a split second, I thought I saw furor, maybe just surprise. But then she leaned back, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. She didn't scream. She didn't yell. She didn't recoil. She just waited. I came here pretending to be homeless, I confessed, my voice breaking. To test everyone in my life, to see who would help me when I had nothing. I wanted to know who cared about me, and who didn't. I wanted to punish people. I wanted revenge. She nodded slowly, as if she had expected something like this, though I could see a flicker of hurt cross her face. I see, she said quietly. I could barely look at her. Shame twisted in my chest like a knife. I had expected anger, disbelief, perhaps even ridicule, but her calmness made me feel smaller than I ever had. I realized painfully that she didn't see me as a villain. She didn't hate me, she just understood me in a way I hadn't expected. You came here to punish us, she said softly, but maybe the real punishment was for yourself. Her words cut deeper than any insult ever could. For the first time, I admitted it. I had been punishing everyone around me for my own failures. My son had grown distant not because of her, but because I had built walls so high that even he couldn't reach me. My anger, my pride, my obsession with control had driven him away long before Lena even entered the picture. I couldn't deny it. I had been the villain. I thought I was testing everyone, I whispered, tears welling up. I thought I would prove that everyone loved me only for money, but the only person who opened their door was you. She gave a small, sad smile. And that should tell you something, Evelyn. Not about me, but about yourself. You've spent so long measuring people by what they could give you that you forgot to see who they really are. You forgot to see the good in others and in yourself. Her words hit me harder than I could bear. I had come here seeking revenge, expecting others to fail me. Instead, I had been confronted with the truth I had been running from all my life. My pride, my anger, my obsession with power. It had cost me the most important thing I could ever lose. My family. I broke down. Tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed in years streamed down my face. I apologized, first to Lena, then to the empty air that felt like it held Michael's presence. I admitted that I had been wrong, that my judgment had been cruel, and that I had let my pride destroy the relationships I loved most. Lena didn't interrupt. She just listened. She didn't scold or lecture. She let me face the consequences of my own actions, and that, more than anything else, was the most terrifying form of justice I had ever experienced. In that moment, I realized my revenge had completely backfired. I had wanted to punish others, but the real reckoning was for me. I had lost the power I thought defined me, and in its place I was left with something much harder, humility. And as I sat there on her couch, finally seeing myself clearly for the first time in decades, I understood that the hardest truths are the ones we see reflected in the kindness of those we've despised the most. And Lena had held up that mirror. The next morning, I knew I had to face Michael. I had spent years controlling his life, trying to shape him into what I thought was the perfect son. I had scolded, judged, and even manipulated him, believing that my way was the only right way. And now, after the experiment, after Lena's quiet lessons in kindness, I realized something I hadn't dared to admit. I had pushed him away long before Lena ever came into the picture. I stood at the door, my stomach twisting. I had called him earlier, and after a few tense minutes on the phone, he had agreed to come. But I didn't know what to expect. Would he be angry, distant? Would he even care that I was here at all? When he arrived, I froze. Seeing him again, grown and independent, the same boy I had raised with so much love and control, was like stepping into a dream I didn't recognize. His eyes searched mine, filled with hesitation and something else. A guarded caution I had never seen before. "Mom," he said finally, voice low. There was no warmth in it. "Not yet." "Michael," I whispered. I need you to hear me out." He nodded slowly, crossing the threshold into Lena's modest home. I watched as his gaze flicked to Lena, sitting calmly beside me, and something clicked. He wasn't here to argue. He was here to see what kind of person I had become, what kind of truth I had uncovered in my little experiment. I took a deep breath, summoning all the courage I had left. "I came here pretending to be someone else," I began, voice shaking. "I wanted to test everyone in my life. I wanted to know who would help me if I had nothing left. I wanted revenge. I wanted to see who loved me for me, and who only loved me for what I had." Michael's eyes darkened slightly, and I saw the pain in them, and he asked quietly, and I was wrong, I admitted, tears brimming. "Everyone I thought would fail me did, and the only person who helped me Was Lena? My voice cracked and I felt my pride crumble completely, and I've spent years blaming her for everything. I blamed her for turning you against me, for taking your love away. But I see now, it wasn't her. It was me. My pride. My anger, my need to control everything and everyone. I drove you away. For a long moment, Michael said nothing. I could feel the weight of all the years, all the arguments, all the silence pressing down on us then. Slowly, he sat down across from me. His gaze softened slightly, and for the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of the son I had raised. Curious, loving, but cautious, Mom, he said finally, voice low and steady. You needed this. You needed to see what really matters. But it took a lot for you to finally see it. I nodded, unable to speak. The guilt in my chest burned like fire, but at the same time, there was a strange relief. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't turning away. He was letting me face the truth without judgment. I'm sorry, Michael, I whispered, for everything. For trying to control you, for blaming Lena, for thinking my money and pride were worth more than love. He reached out and gently took my hand. It's okay, Mom, he said softly. It's not just about forgiveness. It's about change, and you finally see it. I looked at Lena sitting quietly beside us, her calm smile steady. She had endured so much, yet she had given me the gift I hadn't realized I needed. The chance to confront myself, to see my mistakes, to understand what I had lost and what I could still rebuild. I realized then that the revenge I had planned, the punishment I wanted to mete out to my family, was meaningless. The only true reckoning was the one I faced in myself. And as Michael squeezed my hand gently, a tear slipped down my cheek. I had come seeking revenge, but what I found instead was something far more powerful. The chance to repair the relationships I had broken, starting with the two people who mattered most, my son and the woman I had once hated most in the world. For the first time in years, I felt a fragile hope. The days that followed were unlike anything I had ever experienced. For the first time in decades, I felt truly invisible and, paradoxically, truly seen. I had come into Lena's home expecting to punish, to test, to prove something about the people I thought loved me. Instead, I had been confronted with a truth I had spent a lifetime avoiding. My pride had cost me the very things I claimed mattered most. Love, respect, and family. Lena had been the one constant, the one person who opened her door without hesitation, who gave without judgment, who treated me like a human being rather than a project, a problem, or a source of power. And my son, Michael, had been patient, cautious, and willing to let me face the truth about myself without pushing me away entirely. I realized then that the revenge I had sought for years, the one I had carefully plotted, was meaningless. Punishing others, testing their loyalty, watching them fail, it had never been about them. It had been about me. About my need to feel in control, about my inability to see anyone as a whole person, rather than a reflection of my own pride. I began to repair the bridges I had burned. I apologized to Michael not just for the experiment, but for years of controlling behavior, for anger that had driven him away, for the belief that my way was the only way, and I apologized to Lena for misjudging her, for hating her without cause, for failing to recognize her strength and humanity. To my surprise, they both forgave me. Not instantly, and not completely, but they were willing to allow me to try. And that, I realized, was more powerful than any revenge I could have imagined. With their guidance, I began using my wealth differently. I supported Lena and Michael quietly, without fanfare, without needing recognition. I reached out to family members I had ignored, not to test them, but to reconnect. I donated to causes I had once dismissed, not to show off, but because it was right. Every act of giving, every gesture of humility, was a small but vital lesson. True power doesn't come from control, money, or fear. It comes from kindness, integrity, and empathy. And yet, the hardest lesson was the one I faced alone. The real revenge was on me. My pride, my anger, my obsession with control had shaped a life that was hollow, disconnected, and almost unrecognizable. It took losing everything, even if only in pretense, to see what really mattered. I had orchestrated a test for my family, but the results were for me alone. I was the one who had been humbled, stripped bare, forced to confront the truth. One evening, as Lena and Michael sat across from me, laughing softly over a simple game with the kids, I watched the scene unfold with a clarity I had never had before. The house was quiet, warm, and full of ordinary joy, the kind of joy I had spent my life chasing in expensive dinners, flashy gifts, and social power. And now I understood. I had been chasing the wrong things all along. I smiled faintly, a tear slipping down my cheek. I had lost control. Yes. I had lost pride. Yes. But in losing them, I had finally gained something I could never have bought. Understanding, humility, a second chance. The daughter-in-law I had once hated most, the woman I had blamed for every failure and frustration, had been my teacher. And my son, whom I had tried to shape and mold, had been my guide. Together, they showed me what life really meant: love, patience, forgiveness, and the courage to admit when you are wrong. I had come seeking revenge. What I found was far greater. I found the power to change myself, the chance to make amends, and the wisdom to know that the people who truly matter will open their doors and their hearts long before we ever deserve it. And for the first time, I understood that the greatest revenge is transformation, not punishment. Because in the end, the woman I thought I hated had saved me not from others, but from myself, and that, more than anything else, was worth more than all the money and control I had ever possessed.